This is a cradle I put together to set the cab from my 1949 Studebaker 2R5 half-ton pickup on as I go through the restoration process. I actually got this idea watching a video from Paul K _C10 as he took the cab off of his C10 truck, and I used his ideas to put this together. What I'm looking at now is the front of the cradle, and that's where the cab has two mounts that it uses. You see there on the left and there on the right. That's where I plan on the cab mounts sitting on at the front. The actual cab, is you measure when it's on the frame, is only just a little over 17 inches from the mount to the floor at the front, but in the back where it mounts to the frame in the back, it's actually almost 26 inches. So there's a difference of a little over 8 inches between the front and the back, and that's what I've accounted for here. As you move to the side, my distance from the front mount to the rear mount is just a little over 43 inches. I did use these 3-inch steel wheels on the bottom. They seem to be working. They have about 300 pound capacity. And I used 2x8s on the top, 2x4s on the bottom. The front part of the cradle measures 56 inches all the way across from this side to this side. But I could have actually gone to probably 57 inches and got another inch right here for these front mounts to sit on the corners here. So anywhere from 56 to 57 inches would probably work. The height of the cab sits 24 inches off the ground from here to there, and then you'll see what the difference is when we get to take a look at the back side. The back of the cradle is pretty much like the front. The difference being on the front, the cab mounts were only 24 inches off the ground, and for the rear of the cab, it's actually a little bit higher than the front, and so I had to make my blocking go up to 31.5 inches just to try to kind of keep the cab level when I set it down on the cradle. So that's just something to realize there. I have a couple of lessons learned from constructing the cradle to sit my Studebaker cab on. The first one being, when I took the initial measurements from the rear mount to the front mount, I saw that was 43.25 inches, and so I constructed my cradle using that dimension to sit my front cab mount on it and then my rear cab mount. And by doing that, what it left me with on this internal measurement from the inside of one 4x4 to the other was only 33 inches. And where that hurt me was when I went to use my shop crane to slide it underneath there. My shop crane, the width between the legs was actually 36.5 inches. And so I really needed to make this length here at least 4 more inches long. And so my recommendation would be to go from the rear to the front, make that 48 inches. And then once you bolt that to your 4x4s inside of there, you'll have enough room to slide your shop crane underneath there, underneath your cradle. Second one is a little bit more obvious. I just didn't pay attention to it. If you notice here, I've got a piece of a 2x4. It used to go all the way across to that side. What I did take into account was the height of the shop crane. And so as you can see here, I ended up having to cut the inside out just to get the crane underneath there. So if you're putting it together with the side that you're going to roll the crane under, make sure if you want to keep that support board there that you got it up enough so that your shop crane can go underneath of it. This is what I put together as a lifting arm to attach to my shop crane, and then to use this to lift my Studebaker cab off of my Studebaker frame. I got this idea off the internet from a gentleman that's restoring his C10. His username is Paul K _C10, and I'll share it with you in the window. But it's a pretty simple process. It's got a pivot point here. This is where it bolts to the shop crane and allows it to pivot so that you can keep it level. And it's constructed out of 2x8s. I got 2x8s along here and on the other side. And the length for me was only 60 inches for my cab. You just need to make sure you measure your cab if you're using this for something else. But for my Studebaker, 60 inches would fit it all the way from one side to the other of the cab. And then internally I had some 2x8s that I screwed and nailed together to secure this. And then I have a couple of 2x4s here in the middle that I put in and drilled out a 7/16 bolt here. And these two 2x4s were secured to the 2x8s and also to this 2x8 back here. And this is what's actually going to bolt to the shop crane and act as the pivot. You can see where I put these spacers in here and secured them. And then if I roll it on over, what I put was a couple of safety catches here on the end, so the cab wouldn't slide off my lifting arm. And these fit on either side of the cab, and that's how it works. It's relatively simple to mount the cab lift onto my shop crane. Just stand inside of here and I'll lift the crane arm up. I've actually extended it all the way out to the 1/2 ton setting, which is 1,000 pounds. That's more than enough to lift this cab off of the frame. So I've got those kind of lined up. I'm just going to jack up my arm a little bit, try and line up those holes. You get a rather long bolt. I think this is an 8.5 inch bolt that I end up with. Go ahead and push it all through there. Got a washer nut for the other end. Now it's secured there. I'm going to go ahead and lift it up as you see how it swivel. Swivel it back. And what I did do is use a couple of straps there just to hold it that way. But as you can see, it will pivot right here. And you'll see a video here in a second with it actually going in the cab and lifting it up. We're now ready to remove the cab from the pickup frame. There's a cab cradle there in the front. You can see the cab lifting arm mounted on my shop crane there. It just slides through the interior of the cab and will actually connect with the top of the cab there and lift the cab straight up. We did remove the doors for this, so the next few seconds you'll just kind of zoom through the process of removing the cab. We pretty much have the cab separated from the frame and getting ready to just go ahead and pull the shop crane with the cab on it off of the frame. And here we're going to go ahead and set the cab cradle underneath the cab and lower it down on there and secure it. We did make the correction of cutting the lower 2x4 there so that we could slide the shop crane underneath there in order to set the cab down on this cradle. So that ended our adventure with removing the cab off of my Studebaker frame. A couple of key things going back to the lessons learned that we talked about was making sure that my shop crane could fit underneath my cradle. And then the other thing that I needed to worry about was making sure that the width of the cradle could support the shop crane sliding underneath that. So hopefully this will help somebody else out there. Thank you very much, and bye.